Grilled cheese is one of the most nostalgic American foods on the planet. If you've had a childhood, you've had a grilled cheese, and I would say it is pound for pound one of the most delicious lunches out there. Welcome back to my ongoing series where I teach you recipes from the easiest all the way to intensive multi-step showstoppers. If you're not confident in the kitchen, stick around because over the next few videos, I'm gonna be teaching you tons of technique. Consider this your invitation to get in the kitchen and join me. In my opinion, there are two versions of a perfect grilled cheese. The first is classic ooey gooey American cheese white bread, and the other is a little bit fancier, but still reminiscent of the dish from childhood. Good news is they're both really simple, and it's a perfect recipe to practice thoughtful heat application. Equipment-wise, we really only need a 10-inch nonstick pan, a silicone spatula for flipping, and a way to slice cheese off of blocks. I actually just use a Y vegetable peeler for this, which I highly recommend over the straight vegetable peelers. For the classic American grilled cheese, I really like thick store-bought white bread for this. Now, there's been a really odd trend of people using mayo to toast bread, and I honestly just find that revolting, so I won't be doing that. If you've seen this on social media, don't believe it, butter is tastier. There's a reason you've never seen anybody eat a baguette with mayo. It's always butter. Butter is tastier. Building wise, it's super simple. It's gonna be bread, 2 slices of American cheese, another slice of bread. At the stove, turn your burner to medium-low and begin melting a tablespoon of unsalted butter in the pan. If you put the butter in and it foams like this, it's kind of that immediate expression of heat. It's gonna be too hot for what we need. Place that in the pan and let it slowly brown for about 6 minutes or so and then give it a flip. You can easily check on it by just lifting an edge, but it really needs quite a while over this low heat. The cheese needs to get to that maximum gooitude. If you heat the bread too fast, you're gonna end up with unmelted cheese in the middle, which is really not what we want here. Once you flip it, add in another tablespoon of butter and move it around the pan so that it can soak up all of that delicious melted butter. At about 6 minutes or so again on this side, the bread should be delicious, light golden brown, and the cheese should just be perfectly melty. This is exactly what you know and love, but it's sort of the ideal way to execute it. It's perfect in its simplicity, and it's still as delicious at 29 years old as when I was 12. So the goal of a grilled cheese is to end up with a perfectly crunchy, deliciously brown exterior with a melty, ooey gooey interior. And the problem really strikes when heat is too aggressive and you end up with brown, crunchy bread and dry, unmelted cheese. When you try to make it go faster by applying more heat, you don't really get the desired outcome. You just end up with a dish that's been cooked faster, but cooked incorrectly. In cooking, browning usually takes place in 2 different ways. Caramelization is one form of browning where sugar is heated to a point where a chemical reaction occurs and the nature of it is changed and browned and caramelized, and that's what you see in anything that resembles a caramel. It's sugar heated to a point where a chemical reaction takes place. That is not what we're seeing here. With anything like a carbohydrate or a protein, the browning takes place through what is called the Maillard reaction, which is crazy complex, and there's a lot going on with it. At around 300 degrees Fahrenheit or so, carbohydrates and nitrogen-containing amino acids begin to break down and transform into completely new flavor compounds, ones that didn't exist before. The way you get brown, delicious breads, delicious meats that have been browned all take place through this chain reaction of new flavors being created. Although this does take a good amount of heat to get going, you don't have to apply all that heat immediately. It doesn't have to happen all at once. So we are able to achieve that delicious browned bread on the outside while achieving a slowly warmed interior. It's possible and we can do it. Now, for the fancier version, we need to address bread. In my experience, I've tried a ton of different crunchy, delicious, really good artisanal breads for grilled cheese, and what happens is what happens with any sandwich when it's made with bread with a crunchy exterior is my mouth ends up getting super torn up. For something like a grilled cheese where part of the excitement and deliciousness is sort of playing on those flavors of nostalgia, I really like just thick store-bought white bread. In this case, I'm gonna use the exact same bread I used for the regular old school American style grilled cheese. The way that we're gonna really class this up and make it fancier is with the cheese itself that's gonna go in the inside and a little bit of cheese that's gonna go on the outside as well. Gouda is gonna bring salty sweetness and American is gonna bring meltiness. A lot of people have covered this in depth, and I'll link to some videos by some creators who have really done a great job discussing the importance of emulsifying salts in American cheese. People like Adam Ragusa and J. Kenji Lopez Alt have really covered this in depth. But what happens when you add American to other cheeses is those emulsifying salts that are present in the American cheese help the other cheese melt. If you've ever tried to just melt grated cheddar cheese in milk to create a cheese sauce, you know that it splits and is grainy and fatty and just really not good. The emulsifying salts help that process take place in a correct way, something that's glossy and delicious, and it's the reason why American cheese melts the way that it does. I like medium cheddar here to bring a lot of flavor and texture without being too overpowering. We're gonna actually use this cheddar as a cheese skirt to bring a ton of crunch. It almost tastes like kind of a Cheez-It on the outside of the bread. It's really, really delicious. For the building of this, place down a piece of bread, put on the American, and then slice on your Gouda. Usually I like a little bit more Gouda than American on this. Cut your medium cheddar in a way that allows you to add it to the pan later. We're not gonna be adding it to the interior of the sandwich. Here are a list of really, really nice cheeses for the interior of a grilled cheese if you want to experiment. This is what I like, but this also hits that nostalgia American cheese gooiness in a way that some people may not desire. You may want it a little bit stringier or chewier or whatever else you could have. Place your butter in the pan and then place down your sandwich. With the amount of cheese going on here, it's really nice to let this go for at least 6 minutes. It may need a little bit more time, but just again, check the bread, make sure it's nice and browned and that the cheese has started to melt by the time you flip it. Give it a flip once the first side is browned and the cheese has melted to hold everything together. Add a tablespoon of butter as needed. Then we're gonna place our cheddar cheese around the edges of the bread so it's gonna melt, become crunchy, and stick to the crust of the bread. Keep your heat at a place where you see the cheese start to bubble. This could be like a low to medium low. You just wanna make sure that the cheese is gonna become solid and crunchy enough to actually stick. You don't want it to be a melty, falling apart mess on the outside of the bread. Once you can start actually like lifting the cheese skirt edge to check out if it's brown enough, you should be able to flip it and remove it from the pan. Like I mentioned, if you let this go correctly, you're gonna get an edge that is super, super crunchy, really delicious, but it doesn't overpower the rest of the sandwich. It's just kind of a perfect addition to a delicious grilled cheese. With a sandwich like this, there's really only one way to cut it, and it's diagonally. This hits that same like ooey, gooey, centered grilled cheese that you want with a little bit more finesse, a little bit more interesting texture, and a little bit more of an interesting flavor with the Gouda that we've got going in there. When I was testing and trying out a bunch of different cheese mixes, I would make a regular grilled cheese next to it, and if I didn't like the fancy one more than the regular grilled cheese, it was a failure. This is the real only version that beat the classic nostalgic American cheese version, so that's what I went with. I've got a goal to get substantially better at cooking this year, and if you've got a resolution similar to that, I challenge you to make your perfect grilled cheese and tag me on Instagram at Cameron Cooked This so I can share it, share your progress, and share my progress. It's a way we can kind of do this together. I really, really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something. I'll see you here same time next week for another recipe that's gonna be a little bit more challenging. If you need something that's a little bit easier, go check out last week's video about crepes. It's probably the easiest recipe I could possibly think of. I wanna give a quick massive shout out to the amazing, amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. These are people who have decided that my work is worthy of supporting financially, and it allows me to keep making videos like this for you. Their names are going by on screen right now, and I just really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. Cheers.